What's going on, running fans, throwing fans, jumping fans, all around athletics fans? Welcome to the Talking in Ovals podcast. I'm Alex Cuesta. My partner in crime is here with me, as always, Dave Hyatt. What's going on, brother?
Not much, man. What an amazing weekend of track and field. We had 2 high school national meets, NCAAs. I do have a little bone to pick with the NCAAs. I hate the new format where it's all women and then all men. It really kills people coming back for doubles and stuff, and I don't like it. I like when they intertwine both genders, but either way, it was a hell of a weekend for track and field.
You want to know what's funny that you talk about it like being a hell of a weekend? We've now done, this is episode 30.
30.
So we've made it to 30 episodes. But every single week, I think we said, since we started doing this, we picked this up right after Worlds. And I really feel like every single week we have said it's been a hell of a week in track and field, whether it was pros doing it, college, high school. It's just been ratcheted up. And like since XC started, we have not had, a lack of things not to talk about. So we're having a great time.
It's just been insanity. Track is in a very good place right now.
It is in a great place. Before we get all started on the rest of the fun stuff, like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars on Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth. Find us on the socials. And for those that are interested, today's Monday, March 13th of 2023. That is when we are recording. So we have some PRs. Hyatt, we have some. And when I mean some, we have a ton. Do you want to start off with my alma mater?
First, yeah. I'm going to start first with a little homage to our guest last week, Coach Griff. His sprint medley team of Tyrone Benjamin, Mabaruk Adaraba, Will Freeman, and Nick Lafredo broke the school record in 3:33.15 for the sprint med. So congrats there. It was a great way for Manchester to end the season. And now I'll let you go on to your plethora of PRs.
Yeah, we got a bunch more. We got from Coach Tefelsky over there, buddy of the show, from Westfield High School. Both of these schools were at New Balance Nationals doing all this fun stuff over in Boston, which it's a beautiful spot. I don't know. Go on Westfield XCTF Instagram. Coach Tefelsky has a beautiful picture of, the New Balance spot there. But they ran really fast. Westfield was well represented there. I'm just going to run down the gauntlet. Emmanuel Gallanillo set a PR with the 400 meter with 50.65. And then I'm going to talk about people on the 800 mile and DMR, because all three of those teams not only placed top 6 or top 8, but they also had a ton of PRs and set school records. So let's jump right in. 800 meters, Liam Murillo ran a 155, Ryan Daly 157, Andrew Singer 159, Alex Valencia 159, Eamon Mason 2 flat. Then we also have the 4 by mile. I don't have times, but I do have the guys' names there because they're also school record holders now. Ryan Daly, Dan Cortez, as Hyatt told me, Cortez, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Tej Mehta and Avery Keith. And lastly, in the DMR, you're going to hear some familiar names. In the Tej Mehta ran a 307 in the 1200. That's a PB. Joe Piero ran a 50.11 400. That's a PB. Johnny Scalia ran a 158.42. Avery Keith closed out with the 416.88. So Westfield, well represented. Awesome job. Great job, Coach Tefelsky. Way to close out the season. Man, we got spring season around the corner. Listen, I cannot wait.
They ran a 10-12. If you break a school record at Westfield, that is running.
Yeah.
Because I remember them winning pen relays with Amucho running the anchor leg. And I don't think that they ran that fast outdoors as they did. I mean, to run 10-12 and get 6th place, it's just insanity.
It is ridiculous. The times look like college times right now. It's absolutely bizarre. But we were great guests this week. Before we jump in, I encourage everyone to go back to last week. Dave already mentioned our guest from last week, Coach Jason Griffin, head XC track and field coach over at my alma mater, Manchester Township High School, bringing that program to new heights every single year. So loved having Coach Griffin on. Please go back and listen. He's a wealth of knowledge. One of the great coaches we've had on this show. But this week we have somebody that had the unfortunate thing of writing about me every once in a while, but it was really cool. every single time I got a write-up when I was running well in my time, it was usually from this gentleman. He's Scott Clayton, former Asbury Park Press and digital sports writer. What's up, Scott?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me. My time was too soon. If I was 15 years later, I'd have been doing what you guys are doing right now.
Yeah.
Would have been part of the media landscape. They asked me to take pictures once in a while. That was about as cutting edge as it was when I was doing it.
Listen, never too late to start, right? We're just two schmoes that like watching people go in circles and talking to people that used
ovals.
to currently do it. Yeah, ovals. Talking in ovals. Look at me, I'm terrible on my own show. Damn it! But again, Scott, pleasure to have you on. I'm excited to jump right in. So we're gonna start right away talking with you. You know, most of the people they have in common here, they were runners. You as well were a runner, and a pretty good one in the county and conference. When did you first realize, because, a lot of us, we've talked about this, we come from different sports backgrounds, right? We wanted to be a soccer player, football player, basketball player. We were always good at running, but none of us were kind of like track. Yeah. Like, when did you get that spark and was like, hey, I could be pretty damn good at this. This might be my sport.
Yeah, exactly what you said. Definitely grew up trying everything out. Was fairly decent at soccer, had the endurance. That was obvious. I was never the fastest short sprinter on the field, but, I didn't need to be subbed out. I could play the whole game and things like that. My mom actually was my elementary school phys ed teacher. So I think it was probably like fourth, fifth grade was the first time we started doing presidential fitness tests. I heard Griff mention it last week. You do that presidential fitness test, you're running a 600-yard, you're running a mile. And it was like, I think I was either fourth or fifth grade, and I was like the fastest mile in the school. And it felt good. I didn't come, I grew up down in Tuckerton, Pinelands Regional School District. So I didn't come from like, a big track area per se. I knew I'd kind of have to keep it on the back burner until high school. There's no middle school track program to even jump into. So I just kept active with a lot of sports, soccer, baseball. It was a big wrestling area. I even tried my hand at that very, very poorly. But I just wanted to always be involved, be on a team. That was just my identity, being part of the team. So when high school came around, I had the fortune. I like you, Alex, I heard you mention last week, you played a little football in high school. Shout out to cross country guys playing football. I played freshman football and was halfway decent, I guess. So I got called up to suit up for the varsity, the final game of the year. And the head coach was Bill Bruno. And Bruno was the track and cross country, the track, indoor and outdoor track coach at Pinelands at the time. And he just got his hooks in me right then and there. It was like a week of practicing with the upperclassmen. And he's just like, what are you going to be doing in the winter? And I was like, convinced me to come out for track, and he did. He was a salesman first and foremost. So he knew how to get the kids from the hallway. And again, you talked about last week, these kind of smaller schools in the old B South. And there were athletes all over the place. It was just a matter of getting them out, getting them focused. And Bruno was great at that. And, just kind of started indoor my freshman year, and it went from there.
It's nice to have some small school representation here before you jump in, David. It's nice. I've been ganged up by all these giant school, Toms River people coming in. And
we were South was small. I mean, we were in B South.
Your name is Toms River. You didn't belong there. But
we were there. I had the great misfortune of going to high school when Toms River South slummed it in B South for a couple of years.
2 years.
Beat us all. Probably, spring cross, 4 B South titles, and then they went back where they belong. Up in A South. Didn't have to see him again. It was great.
No, listen, I mean, that was a kind of a cool time in Ocean County because I remember in cross country, I don't know if this has happened since or prior, but 2 teams from B South went 1 and 2 in the team championship for Ocean County. It was South, and then it was Pinelands for back-to-back years, our sophomore and junior year. So that was really cool. I don't know if that's happened since or if it ever happened prior, but that was cool. Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel bad because we were in B South for 2 years, and that was probably the greatest Pinelands teams ever for cross country. And they just couldn't mess with us. No
problem. We thought we were pretty good. I mean, we won a sectional title my junior year, so that was fall of '94. So we went down there in South River Group 2. The year before, we had been runners up. That's the kind of thing a B South school usually kind of focuses on, sectionals, maybe groups if you're really good. But yeah, it was wild being at on kind of like the podium of Ocean County meets back then. I mean, Southern was a sleeping giant, which has obviously woken up in the time since. East had some teams. North had seemed to have really great individual talent.
Right.
Couldn't put a team together at certain times, but
it was cool. It was just us and Pinelands, and it kind of wasn't even really close for our sophomore and junior. Like, we were the two dominant teams in Ocean County, and it was really, really cool.
North certainly put it together when I was in high school. I'll mention that with Dan Bingham and some of the guys that they had incredible.
When they had Jelly there.
And they had Jelly there, and their depth was insane.
He's now crushing it. He's now crushing it up at Rutgers with Bobby Farrell.
So you had the unique route, right, Scott? Of a lot of us, we all had middle school programs to go to. I was a weirdo because my family decided to take me out of Manchester. I was over in Lakehurst, New Jersey, when my last 2 years of middle school, they wouldn't let me run at the middle school. So for insurance purposes. So we have a semi-similar route where I didn't jump back into it until freshman year. I did it in sixth grade. I was pretty good. I think I ran like a 5:23 as a sixth grader. So I was like a good miler. And, I didn't get a chance to jump back into it until freshman year. So talk about kind of your fondest memories, go down memory lane for me. Talk about get us through high school, get us into UPenn, because man, you ran at UPenn. UPenn's a really good running school, man. That's no slouch. So give us some memories you got.
I did. I'll tell you, I mean, famed New Jersey philosopher Tony Soprano once said, remember when is the lowest form of conversation, but I don't care. We're going to play Remember When for a little while. This is fun. Appreciate you guys.
That's our whole show is Remember When. Thanks, Tony.
Started some funny things were just popping into my head thinking, walking down memory lane in my own mind. I remember signing up for indoor track, and it's just like, what events do you want to do on an index card at registration? And I was like, distance, 400, 800. Well, that was distance. 400 seemed pretty far. It was a lot farther than 100. It was a lot farther than 55. So that got knocked out of me probably my first practice. I remember, doing middle school, gym miles and stuff like that, never quite being able to break 6. And doing that on my second day of practice, just because I had the right people pacing me, and it was just a mile on the track at the end of a run to run 5:40 the first time, and then it spiraled from there. I knew I was kind of behind the 8 ball with my competition in freshman sophomore races and stuff, because a lot of people had done it before, either in middle school or at least coming off of a cross country season had that pace. So it took a little while, but indoor track was fun, get a couple medals in freshman meets and go from there. Bruno always just kept it focused on the team. We were always, more focused on relays than individual meets, it seemed like. And that's just kind of what was drilled into us. So I think freshman year, I got down to 449 by the end of it. It was a big kind of step forward. Yeah. And then sophomore year, gave up football, considered soccer again. But, we had a pretty good cross-country team. So as Dave alluded to, that was a second-place Ocean County team, second-place South Jersey Group 2 team. And, from there it was off. It was a lot of fun. Just kind of stuck my nose in with my own squad. Still remember the feeling, getting it handed to us at Ocean County College by Tom's River South in a dual meet that we were way too pumped up for.
Yeah, I think we got the first 4 spots.
Oh, I'm sure, Dave. You also probably had JV kids out there changing the arrows on the trees.
No, listen, that was a tough course. So, the people who didn't run there, we had a home course advantage. That was a tough. You had to go up that hill twice.
Dave, that course was insane. It was your pine barrens, sugar sand for half of it. Big hill, you had to run twice. It's take 2 lefts, a right, turn around, touch your toes, and you had a distinct advantage on us. I'm pretty sure we probably all charged out and won the first 100 meters of that race, and then you guys just laughed at us the rest of the day. But yeah, that was an awful bus ride home. We were pretty jazzed up. I mean, it was back in the day when you kind of hated the people you competed against.
Oh, absolutely! I couldn't stand you guys.
They talked about that all the time.
Whatsoever. have no problem admitting Tom's River South was the enemy. And Alex, I'm going to throw in some of your predecessors at Manchester weren't far behind. So it was good, man. It was just, Bruno was that kind of coach. I know O'Leary was that kind of coach. It was just everything was bulletin boards, and which foreshadowing led to my career after college. But it was just like, it meant something to go into school, see the newspaper clippings, be like, that's the guy, that's who I'm gunning for this week. I'm going to take him down, whoever's on the cover, whether it was Dave Hyatt, Jay Klophouse, Sean
McCafferty.
But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And then, we really kind of helped grow a program, which was a lot of fun at Pinelands. Again, relays were always the highlight. We won Ocean County relays indoor my junior year. We were second at counties outdoor. So, to be from Pinelands, that was doing something. So we were really proud of that.
And like the thing that I recall is, I raced Scott a lot in high school. Like every freshman meet, outdoor track, it was like he and I were by far the top two distance runners for our class in Ocean County until Sean came back and then transferred. And then my buddy Klophouse came in and transferred our senior year. But like he and I would always battle. And I probably got the best of him freshman, sophomore year. And then from that point on, I think I only beat him once, like our last two, maybe at like meet a champs in cross country our senior year. But
you've got a great memory, Dave. That is exactly right. I suffered through a terrible race, had a cramp. I remember you kind of like, come on, Scott, like through the backwoods on the way to the finish line. I didn't have it. I was up. I stuck my nose in like maybe like 25 to 20, and then it just fell apart after the bowl.
But yeah, so it was like I beat him early in our career, and then he kind of had to play with me the last 2 years. That's why I had to bring in Klophouse for some reinforcement.
Isn't it funny too? Like you guys talk about much like you guys hate each other, right? Like in a competitive fashion. But then at that point, when Dave knows he's looking at the back of you and he's about to pass you, and he's like, "This ain't right. Come on, Scott, what are you doing here?" Like it's like that, like just that friendly rivalry, just that competitive juice. Like he obviously knew something was up. And as much as you guys wanted to go at each other, like if Dave wanted to beat you, Dave wanted to know that it wasn't because something was wrong. Like so, it was that's pretty cool to hear that even like the little bit of humanity that runners have with each other still comes out at times, even when you're fierce and in competition.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I like I said, I remember it to this day pretty clearly. And a lot of the kind of hatred that was built up was just there was just communication walls. There wasn't internet. There weren't cell phones. Like right. I didn't see Dave until we'd show up at a meet on Saturday. I didn't know what he was doing during the week. I didn't know what he liked to do, what concerts he went to and things like that. And it was just like, so it's just kind of like, it's a figment of your imagination that just kind of spirals out of control until he's just the enemy. And that's a lot of humanity that he was just like, hey, good job. So really like senior year, I remember it was starting to be like, okay, like who are these guys I run against? Like, by that point we have licenses, we can hang out with each other. Like I remember going and running with McCafferty on a weekend here and there and being like, oh, I actually like don't hate you as much as I built you up to, like be my enemy. It's kind of cool. And then you see now, and that's kids from day one on track. They're like, well, this is my team, but those are my friends, kind of.
Right.
Like
I think they're too friendly.
The kids at this other team, and it's just kind of weird and muddy.
I think they're too friendly. We had MySpace. Like my high school was MySpace, and like you kind of connected with the other kids, but at the same time, like MySpace was one large like extension of Let's Run. So it was like you would sit there and be anonymous kind of on the Let's Run boards, but then if like you were friends with someone on MySpace, you would still kind of talk mess to them, and like there was whole boards of like us just friendly-ish ripping each other apart, like rival runners, like from the school. So it was nothing like this. Like we did know each other better because we were communicating outside of just meets and things like that. But at the same time, it still wasn't friendly. It was still kind of like, we hate you. We know you now outside, but we still don't like you very much. So it was bizarre. And
we had nothing.
Yeah. You guys just had pure unadulterated hatred.
We wouldn't know the result of me until the next day. And then it used to anger my head coach so much because I don't know if it was the Observer or the Press, but one of them would only show who won. One of them would show top three. So like you didn't know, like, all right, the first guy ran this, but what is their second and third guy run? So I remember like before every meet was just like everything was on the blackboard, like this, that. Like it took so much more planning from a coaching aspect than now because you didn't know.
Yeah. No, it's bizarre.
From you now, Dave, but I mean, we've obviously talked in the years since we went to high school, but like from you or from Eddie Baines or whoever went to South, how similar O'Leary and Bruno were, but like whether it was true or not, like had a persona that they couldn't stand each other and just wanted to like beat each other badly, but they were the exact.
I mean, I definitely know that O'Leary respected Bruno, but he never would have told him that, and vice versa.
Yeah, no, and look at us. We had an oval table of 6 coaches on the internet not too long ago, sharing their ideas, talking about training things and talking about how they love to communicate. So it's such a different time. But we're going to jump back to you. So you go to the University of Pennsylvania, a fantastic school overall, not education-wise, but also a really good running program to this day. They're just a very skilled program. And arguably like the second most historic track in the country outside of Hayward is right there with Penn Relays. So what was it like, the decision making to go to UPenn? Where else could you have gone? And then talk about your time at UPenn and what it was like having that as your home track and being there and all that.
Yeah, it was very cool. Again, relays being the thing at Pinelands, it was like Penn Relays being the relays was so built up. And then the drive our sophomore year was to really qualify for 4x8. We were an up and coming program. We weren't quite, Penn Relays DMR ready, but, we thought, 4x8, I think they took like 45 small schools, 45 large schools. We really kind of focused on that being our in to Penn. To get us away from just the 4x4, 4x1, which I never would have competed in. So we went all over the place. That was really like when things started to really gel as far as like my identity with track. It would just be like, van rides to New York to try and qualify or, random like Carney relays one time. I think that was my junior year. Just like Bruno would put us all in a van and we'd drive to a meet. But my sophomore year, we went to William and Mary to the Colonial Relays, ran, I think like an 8:12 or something like that, and qualifying down there.
Nice.
As long as you run 8, the magic time then was 8:15 for Penn Relays.
Always the magic small school time for Penn Relays. And so we got in, we ran really out of our shoes. We ran 8:06 at Penn Relays, and it was just a magical weekend. For some reason, Bruno, who was like, he was a psychology teacher, he was always in our heads about like who was. We were 4 pretty even 800 runners, but he was always kind of, twisting things around to, just kind of psych you up. I ran anchor as a sophomore. I remember there was a senior, 2 juniors, and me, and he put me on anchor, which was crazy. There's a guy, Darnell McLean. Dave, I'm sure you remember that name from
Asbury Park.
He took the baton about 20 meters behind me and was maybe 30 meters ahead by the 200 mark. He just must have went out in like 52 or something like that. And then coming around the last turn at Penn Relays, like I saw him rigging up and caught him. And it was great. We beat them. We always kind of traded wins with Asbury on the weekend. So a lot of fun.
I remember you guys running 8:06 because I remember like Mr. O'Leary's like, we are not going to run slower than Pineland. And like you guys had run like an 8:12. And all of a sudden you're in like 1, 2, 4. And he's like 8:06. And we're like, we haven't run that fast this year. He's like, well, you want to be the best coach can. And I think we went out and ran like 8:05.
You did. I know. I heard that. At that point, that was like, Greer wasn't quite the 800 stud just yet. That was like him making the leap, and Geiger making the leap was all happening around that time. So it's like,
Well, because Greer actually ran the 1500 the Friday night.
All right. I don't recall that. Yeah. But all in all, it was just a great weekend. And I just remember coming home and being like, that's where I want to go to college. So it was always top of my list. I do remember by the time I went senior year and started actually, you could like get the college phone calls. When the Penn coach finally called, he's like, oh, I got your number from Sean McCafferty. It's like, oh, that's really cool. Like, I wish you could me on your own. But, it was like he was calling, trying to recruit Sean, and Sean's like, nah, I'm not really interested, but you probably want to talk to Scott. He talked about Penn all the time, and now he wants to go there. So he ended up linking me up with my college coach, and it was always kind of top of the list. I applied to Rutgers, Georgetown, William and Mary, and Princeton, but didn't get into Georgetown and Princeton. So came down to Penn and William and Mary, but Penn was a no-brainer for me.
That's awesome. That's really fun. So your time at Penn, talk about being a Penn runner. What memories you have of college, and what are outside of partying? What was your fun times that you remember as a runner at Penn?
Was there an outside of partying? I don't know. It's kind of always interwoven in, but no, we had a fun. I think Penn was last at HEP since the Ivy League championship. Penn, I'm pretty sure, was last in cross country the year before we got there. I had a pretty big freshman class with me. There was like 6 or 7 of us that all contributed throughout the years. We just gradually moved up. I know high school, I probably identified more as a track guy. College, it was flipped. It was cross country for me all the way, and it was more the team aspect again. Just always counting on your brothers to come through and root for them. So I think we got up to 3rd in HEPS my senior year. I was, I think, 5th in the Ivy League, so first team All Ivy, and then qualified individually for nationals, which was in Bloomington, Indiana, which was a lot of fun. So I qualified. Probably the greatest race of my life was the qualifying race. It was a NCAA regional at Lehigh. And took 3rd there. Got to run as an individual, but my teammate also qualified as an individual. So the two of us, Sean McMillan and I, were able to go out and compete in Indiana together. It was a lot of fun. That kind of, it used to be on a Monday before Thanksgiving. And it was just great. It was just great. And then, like you said, track was always kind of part of the Penn identity because of the relays. We just always had a really balanced team, really strong in mid-distance, probably above all else, really good, jumps coaches too while I was there. So it's just wild, people from all over the place. And I was on a team with Olympians. If Mike Aguilar from Lakewood was a hurdler. He ended up running in the Olympics for Belize, I believe, in 2008 in the intermediate hurdle. So we overlapped at Penn. It was just really cool.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. That's again, everyone's running journey is different, and it was cool hearing about yours, and love hearing you reminiscing with Dave, because it's nice to hear. It is nice to hear someone that wasn't on Dave's team, which is cool. A little bit, and direct rival was also fun, because I don't think we've had too many direct rivals, Dave, outside of Ian Hahn. Too many direct rivals, and it was cool to hear you.
He was younger though.
Going back, yeah, Ian was younger, but
he was younger.
Yeah, but it was cool. But so you finish up at UPenn. Do you know that you want to jump into journalism and media right away? Is that what you majored in there? Is that what you wanted to do?
I majored in English. I knew I could write, to the level of what they were looking for. It took a little while to get going. I tried to continue my career a little bit. I went down to DC. It was still the Reebok Enclave. Late 90s team. My college roommate, Sean, who I mentioned, he was kind of recruited to go down there. He was an 840 steeplechaser. Wow. And I just kind of went along for the ride and was like, I'm going to stick my nose in, train with these guys a little while and see what comes of it, see if I can get better. But 2 things. I remember going to a meeting and Coach Gaggs was still there. Frank Gagliano was running the team. And it was September or October of 2000. Get down there and he's like, the team's moving to Stanford. We're all the money's out there. We're going to Palo Alto. We're going to be the Nike farm team. And I'm like, see you later. I'm not moving to the West Coast at this point. I hadn't proven to myself I was any better than I was in college. So obviously, anything on a pro level was not going to happen for me. And then, there were just high school kids breaking 4 at that point. And I was like, all right, it's time for me to step away. I was down in Arlington, Virginia, living it, and went and watched Alan Webb win his sectional cross country meet. And it's just oh, this dude, he's 3-4 years younger than me. He looks older than me. He's even though he's 15, 16 years old. And I'm if that's the next level, I'm not there. So I ended up coming back to the area, Jersey, Philly area. Can't really recall the timeline, but it was like fall of '01, like after 9/11 and stuff. I got, a call from a family friend. Joe Zadalis was a editor at the Asbury Park Press. It was always something I was very interested in doing. Knew I could kind of pick it up and be pretty legitimate. Again, I loved the amount of coverage we got back in the '90s when that was really all there was.
Yeah.
And Joe and I had a talk. He's like, you got to cover some dregs. I'm sending you this like field hockey game, your first day. And I was like, I went to New Egypt to watch like Ocean get crushed by Ocean City in field hockey. And I'm like, how do I write a story about one team getting killed with their local paper without really talking about too much about the team that won? And it was, you just kind of figure it out on the fly. I can't say there was all that much training, but once it came to track season, I mean, they had a writer for cross country and track and field, Mike Kerwick, and he ran against us as well. Dave in high school, he went to Homedale with like Rich Christensen and them. Got to know Mike a little bit. It was like, he was obviously interested in growing in his career, getting the different beats than just being the track and cross country guy. And at that point, that's all I wanted to be, was the track and cross country guy, because I just felt I could do it really well. So by like winter '01, '02, and then for the next maybe 6-7 years altogether between the two outlets, I was covering short conference track and field.
Yeah.
Listen, every coach that I know was so excited when Scott got that job, because it was just great to have someone who was so knowledgeable and who understood, like, one, he actually knew what the sports were, how to keep score. I mean, you have some people out there who have such little knowledge of basic things for the sport. But I remember like even my coach, because I was coaching back at high school South End. I was an assistant with my coach, and they're like, man, Scotty Clayton is writing some unbelievable stuff. I remember just every coach was just so pumped to have someone of his knowledge just writing for our local paper. It was incredible.
That's cool to hear. I appreciate that, Dave. I will say, I mean, it was a lot of fun. I felt like, I brought some legitimacy to it. I still knew a lot of the coaches. A lot of the coaches knew me, and there were others I obviously got to know pretty well at that time. I know, like, Katie and Amanda Trotter were like the big thing when I started, and it's like, get to know Jeff Harrison at Red Bank, and it's like, coaches always want to feel you out, see if you knew what you were talking about, and not just like one of those guys who rolled in with a pen behind his ear, went to journalism school, and this is where the newspaper threw him. It became obvious to them pretty quick that I had a background in the sport, and even if they didn't know me or what I ran, they knew I could at least talk the talk and, talk splits and training and things like that. So it was a lot of fun. And I'll say, like, at that time, the Asbury Park Press, like that rally section that would come out on Saturdays, was
the best.
It was a good place for a writer. Really, honestly, I'll tell you, if, money was no object and like the job could remain, if the industry was the same, I'd have never left that job. It's so much fun. I had a lot of fun, and it challenged me to kind of be creative and tell the stories. And I'd always fight with the other writers, like fight for that cover of the rally. And no, I got a really good story this week. I know, like, this is what's going to happen in the short conference meet. And, I can kind of set it up on a tee so that when you're recapping the results the next day, kind of looks like I knew what I was talking about.
It's interesting because I can't remember if you interviewed me in '04 or not after sectionals. I don't know if it was you, but I remember I did get interviewed because I ran well on both days of sectionals, and I did get an interview. But I'm just trying to think if it was you or not, because I remember it did run in the press, so it might have been you.
Probably. I would bounce around because South Jersey, if you're talking track, I assume you bounce around, kind of have to pick where you wanted to go, and that's the weekend because you're in 4 different locations. So there's maybe 2 people on staff that know the track, and then, 2 people that are like coming off the wrestling beat, and you got to like give them some notes so that they don't like, story, because they might end up seeing the best performance of the weekend. And when you're laying out the paper the next day, it's like, oh, of course, like so-and-so broke a conference record when, not to name any names, but like just a less familiar writer was covering it. I wish I went to South Plainfield instead of, Egg Harbor was where the action was at.
It was. Now, since you were writing for a more of a local paper, did you have any interaction with the Jim Lamberts or the Ed Grants, or like would they contact you for like things happening locally so that they could use it in the Star Ledger, or like was there like a free line of communication there?
Second half of that question I'll answer first. Like, I think I got Lambert's trust early on as well. Just, Lambert's an encyclopedia. Sorry, I'm tripping over my words. So he knew my name. He and I had never really spoke when I was writing. I do remember one time I won a cross country meet, like the Stewart Invitational. I was just like, Scott Clayton could not be reached for comment. Was in the Ledger, and I was just like, dude, wait, I'm right here. Like, we're a green uniform, but he didn't try that hard to interview me, and I always busted his chops about that. That was like the only thing he ever wrote about me in high school. But I got to know him pretty well. It was like, I think like indoor track especially, the press table would be like down by the finish line at Princeton when it was still at Princeton. All these relay meets, these group meets you'd be there for 11, 12 hours on Saturdays and Sundays. I just remember listening to every Super Bowl in the early 2000s, like driving home from a winter track relays or something like that. So obviously you got to kill time. You get to know those guys pretty well. So, I mean, Jerry Carino, who's at the Asbury Park Press now, was writing for the Home News and Tribune. This guy, John Haley. Reuben Frank from the Burlington County Times.
Oh, yep.
He was beat writer, WIP, like radio voice. He was always around during indoor track, outdoor track. And then obviously Lambert, and it was mostly Rich Bevensy covering the girls track at that time. So it was cool.
That's awesome. It's kind of interesting because I actually worked at the press from like 08 to 09. I was there laying out the box ads on pages, and my goal was to eventually get to the sports desk. And I ended up giving up because that job just wore me down. But it was like, it's funny that you left the year that I was coming in, like post college and stuff. So it's kind of funny.
I didn't know that until now. That's crazy. Yeah,
it's fun. It's real fun. So when you were doing it, how cool was it to be able to cover the area that you grew up competing in? Was that like lots of fun to come in and like have a real understanding? Like Dave said, the coaches liked you because they figured out quick with you to understanding. But for you, was it kind of surreal to be like standing on the other side of the fence sometimes, or walking through the infield to go do an interview and not like, okay, I don't have to warm up to run on this track I've seen and ran invitations on like 1,000 times. Like, was there like some like surreal moments for you, like looking at it and like seeing maybe some ridiculous times? Like, man, we didn't do that in high school. Like,
exactly. I mean, yeah, you got to cover the cream of the crop, and it really was an era where short conference just dominated the state. I mean, I feel for you, some of the talent you had to run against,
Craig Forries and some of those guys were just insane.
Yeah, I mean, he's really the guy that I kind of probably popped in my head first, just because it was like one of those ground floor things. Like, so if I was doing the job for 7 years, I got to see basically every race the kid ran in high school.
And Tommy Friscia was really good from Red Bank Catholic or Red Bank Regional. Tommy Friscia in the 800, 153 kid. He was incredible.
Yeah, there are just so many quality athletes that came through, and it's just I got to see the best. And whether it was at a short conference meet or a sectional meet, but like, you go to Penn in that time and you knew there were 5 stories you were going to end up writing about short conference athletes. And I just tried to be creative about it and always just kind of pitch my editors and beg for more space in the paper. It's like, no, Thursday I want to write about the jab thrower and the girls DMR and like, a high jumper. And they're like, you can't give that much space to, track in April. It's not even June yet. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. And you just like fill notebooks and just like, well, I'm going to get as much as I can in the Saturday notebook section. And it was fun. I was just, it was easy. I'm not going to say like it was anything it wasn't, but I was just enthusiastic about it. So I was just like roam meets, talk to everybody I could, see what was going on. And some pretty cool stories came out of it, aside from just, who won the race or who won the pole vault.
So I got a question for you. So you're writing for the press and obviously newspaper format. Did you start to see a change that we were getting away from newspapers and that everything was starting to go in this digital way, or when you left, was it still pretty heavy on the print side?
Yeah, for sure. I remember I my memory's failing me because I don't remember the story, but I know I did like one of the big rally cover stories and put a lot of work into it. Those would always take a lot of time. You'd want to do like 5-6 interviews, like not just talk to the subject, but coaches, sisters, godparents, whatever, like whoever could lend you some color to the story. And I put a lot of work in it. And I remember going to a meet and seeing the subject of the story. It's so weird, but I don't remember who it was about. But I'd be like, "Oh, did you see the story?" And they're like, "Nah, what?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, like if that was me, that I would have woke up, like sprinted to Wawa."
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Because it was, probably a big splash photo on the rally section, a little teaser on the cover of the paper. I would have been hot shit. And it was like, sorry, I don't know if I can curse. I apologize.
Oh, I don't care if you curse. Doesn't bother me.
Can't believe I got this far, and that's my first one. But yeah, it was just like, oh wow, weird that the kid wasn't really interested, or just like, and it was obvious at that point that it was the newspaper itself. Things were moving online. By that point, we were pushed into like blogging a little bit, so it was like another thing I could do: get on the Asbury Park Press website, write a little blog, and at that time, I just knew everything I wanted to say or everything I wanted to report on wasn't going to get to print. So it's just extra space for me. So I'd probably just, go off on tangents on the blog, but it kept it in. But I could tell I would start getting as much interaction on blogs or, like you said, message board posts and die-stat and things like that than I would for actual print articles. So it was 2006 that this outfit, Digital Sports, came in and launched a website. It was kind of it tried to be like ESPN.com for high school sports. So it was set up to kind of have the schools themselves fuel like stats into the website, but it really just became an online version of the newspaper. And did that for another 2 years, I think, kept me involved in the sport. And by that point, they put a digital camera in my hands. I'm like editing my own photos, shooting video interviews. That was kind of the first time you'd see those pop up in like 07, 08. It was a lot of fun, but it was definitely, the writing was on the wall that it was changing. I think the press hung on a little bit for some good coverage, but, by now it's pro and college, and you're lucky if anything beyond football gets covered in high school, I feel.
Yeah, it's true.
And Gannett has kind of pushed it all to the back burner, right? Like APP used to be it, and Gannett's kind of like, I'm surprised they're still funding. I'm not going to lie, like at this point. But so you obviously, you were in media for a long time, right? A good chunk of time. What do you feel about the changes that we have with current media? Obviously, with the rise of social media, things like Substack, independent journalists constantly running around. How do you feel about these current changes? Are you someone who's kind of like old guard, like, no, the journalists should be getting the scoops in the newspapers? Or are you kind of open to what's been going on where, Dave and I can do something like this? And, if we get big enough and someone does something great, hey, maybe you want to jump on the show tonight real quick, we'll record something and we can kind of get like, how do you feel about what's going on right now and the changes in media?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, since leaving in like 2008, I've bounced around a lot of careers, but I've definitely always come back to track, kind of see what's going on. And my first instinct to answer that question is I feel like part of the storytelling aspect has gotten lost, because it's like you can show the video, you can sit on your phone on like a subway in Tokyo and watch the New Jersey Meet of Champions on a stream, and then get video of all the interviews with the winners afterwards and things like that. But to me, it was taking those interviews, taking, my knowledge of the race and actually making it a narrative, or, it was a little harder in track because there was just so much going on to kind of feed a narrative, but like, especially in cross country, like tell the story about the race rather than just showing the race. So, not to, be on my high horse or anything, but like that was the part I liked, was like kind of lay it out for somebody who wasn't there. But now, everybody can be there from their phone, no matter where you are. But I mean, it just lends itself to so much more engagement. I mean, I stumbled upon, hanging out with my high school friends and stuff. Like somebody sent me the link to your podcast, and it's like, oh, go back and listen to obviously like Baker and Sean and the guys I know, Griff. But it's just great. It's like, anybody can kind of get involved. Anybody can have their voice heard. So it's really cool. It's just different.
It's cool to hear you say that because I think that's something Dave and I are trying to do here. And, we've said it before. That's not what we started out. We didn't start out thinking that we wanted to tell stories, right? That wasn't kind of our initial goal. But I feel like it's something that, we just want to talk track. But then it kind of evolved into that. And I think it's awesome because it's kind of what you mentioned. And I think we're doing it a little bit different way, right? We're not talking about the events and making it a story, but we're taking people and we had Johnny Gray on, one of the greatest middle distance 800-meter runners in the history of man. And obviously in America. And here he's on the show saying, yeah, I didn't start running until junior year. And I dropped like 20 seconds in a year. And I was running 149 or 151 as like a senior. It's like, things that I don't know if many people knew unless you knew Johnny. So I feel like we can get some cool stuff out of this. And I like that you mentioned the narrative and the storytelling because I think that's something we're trying to do here. The guys over at Citius Mag are doing a fantastic job where they just have like five chats with the athletes when they're done. Drink a beer, let's talk. Like, I think that there is some good stuff there, but I do also agree with you where it's like you can see the race and you can go catch a race replay. If you have, Mile Split Pro, you can go catch the whole entire Meet of Champions replay if you want. And, if you're a Flow Track Pro member, you can watch so many of these big meets. So the storytelling possibly does get lost a little bit unless you follow a blog or something like that. So I think that's a cool aspect, a cool thing that you bring up there.
It's gone from the whole media landscape. I mean, nobody picks up a newspaper or goes on to ESPN.com after an NFL game, be like, tell me about the game I just watched. It's more, after the writers have been able to get their interviews and formulate columns and opinions and, who's got the bulletin board material and stuff like that. So that's why, I didn't want to just regurgitate back what happened, but lend some color to it just to make the reading experience, more interesting for people. But I mean, I don't know about you guys. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I watch a lot of clips. I'm not on TikTok, but those TikTok videos end up on Instagram or Twitter, and you see them there, and it's like, yeah, I'm guilty of what everybody in society is. If you can give it to me in a minute, I will take that minute and then be on to something else. So it's really hard to sit down and kind of focus on reading a 10, 15-minute story about, a high school athlete.
Yeah, it's hard to actually focus on a movie too without having your phone in front of you now. It's terrible.
So Scott, I want to ask you about something. You mentioned him earlier. Your old coach, Bill Bruno, legend. Obviously, I'm sure you love the man. And then he goes on to run the NJSIA for track and field. And you talk to any coach, his time there was some of the best times for the whole sport because he was a track guy. He went in there. He made perfect changes. He got the meet at the bubble indoors. He was just such an amazing guy and really cared about the sport and helped advance it so many ways. What are some of your memories about Coach? I mean, I know he's been gone now for a couple of years. So just kind of talk about him and what he meant to you and how you felt that he was able to get everyone on the same page. It's not easy to get all these coaches, on the same page. And he was able to kind of rally everyone together, bring in wonderful changes for the sport. So just kind of talk about him a little bit. I'm sure he has a special place in your heart.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, he was right there alongside my family members as the people I was closest to and, the most formative time of my life. So it was obviously great to see him. I mean, he built a track program from nowhere at Pinelands, and it went back to nowhere by and large when he left, which probably would have been 98, 99. Or maybe it was a little later. My brother graduated in 2000, so I think he got to coach him all through. But yeah, took AD jobs, I think at Howell and Brick, had the Brick schools, which obviously was a lot to oversee with two schools and, the different programs between Old Brick and Brick Memorial. But it was wild to see him end up in the NJSIA because he was always, just full of ideas and how he could do it better. And, he ran meets, he'd be like the meet director for meets down at Pinelands. And I think he was like meet director of the short conference all the times we were in high school. So like he'd be running the meet and not really allowed to be coaching us because he'd have his officials gear on, but, knew he was getting over there telling us what to do and everything. It was just such a passion for him. He's a guy that wore his passion on his sleeve. I mean, it is sad coming up on 2 years since he passed. But at the same time, I mean, his services in Asbury Park, I mean, brought so many people together that were part of my life from those old track teams. It was like an informal reunion. And I know that's the way he would have wanted it to be, is all of us just kind of getting together and celebrating his life and all the good times he brought us. But it was one of those things, I mean, not to compare, but it was, similar to me being at the Asbury Park Press, and that it was like, he didn't have to prove his legitimacy. He just cared more than anybody else. And that's why they handed him kind of the track part of the NJSIA. And it's just like, you want this the most, go run this. And like you said, a lot of improvements were made. He was definitely an athlete and coach-minded administrator, which sadly is not always the case at a high school sports organization. You would think that would be second nature, but it wasn't.
I mean, if you look at the last 2 years since he's been gone at the NJSA, and it kind of shows how valuable he was even more. Things are, it's just some of the choices that they make, but I mean, I'll digress from that. But when he was just such a positive, he just had this positive aura that he could bring everyone together, and it was great. I mean, everybody flourished because he was in that role, and it just had to be so cool seeing your old coach in such a prominent role, and I'm sure he was proud of you and all of his guys for what they've done. So that's just a cool story.
Yeah, it was. And he threw me a bone every once in a while. I would cover the indoor meet, or not cover, but be like the announcer for the indoor meet champions for like a live feed, like kind of was like the flow track thing before flow track. And even, I don't know if it was Sidney McLaughlin's junior or senior year when MOC was at Central, he's like, come be the PA announcer for that. And I was like, are you kidding? I haven't announced a track meet in 10 years. It's just like, you're great. Nobody will know that you haven't been in. You'll take right to it. And I was just like, I really appreciate you having this much faith in me. But that was always his thing. He showed that he had faith in people and got them to do things that they didn't know they could do or that they weren't comfortable in doing. And it's funny. I mean, he was such an inspirational guy for us. But to think back, and one of my good friends, Jason Resch, is Stockton University's track and field.
I mean, Tom Resch was my coach for years over at Manchester. His dad.
Yeah, full circle.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like Jason and I talked down. It's just funny how, and it wasn't a Bruno thing specifically. It's more like of the era. It's funny how bad of a tactical coach Bill Bruno was, but it didn't matter. You wanted to run through a wall. But it's like you get done from kind of a lousy split on a 4x8, and he'd be like, just run faster. And it's like, which is obviously antithetical to like everything we know about, distance running and anaerobic running or whatever. And it's just like, well, if you go out in 56 and come back in 63, you still broke two.
Yeah, but you're like, but I'm not coming back in 63 if I go out in 56.
63. How am I going to go out in 56 and still come back in 63? Well, it didn't matter. It was about, being in the moment. And, he made a team out of some real ragtag individuals, like, people that probably didn't stay above the law for long after high school.
So before we jump out of here, I got to ask you one last thing. You were around the sport for a long time through high school, college, and then you got to write about it. What do you think we can do as, fans of the sport to make this a casual fan thing where we can grow the sport and make people pay attention to track more than every 4 years at the Olympics? And then maybe a quarter of those people that give a crap at the Olympics caring for worlds, right? Outside of like people that enjoy track, do you have any ideas on how to make this popular for, the common person that might just like sports?
Gambling, probably, find a way to place bets on races.
Sarah Slattery said that same exact thing. That was Sarah Slattery.
Sarah Slattery,
Yep.
Yeah.
FanDuel.
It boggles my mind that, like people would rather watch cars go around the track than humans.
Hey, you leave NASCAR alone.
Humans. It's disheartening. And obviously, a car can go out there and do what it does every Saturday, but that's got to be part of it. Got to be part of the appeal, that you can kind of just get in on the action. But obviously, there's so many barriers to that being the case. It's hard to keep the athletes on the up and up if that were the case, if there were money flowing through the sport like that. But if there were a way to insulate the athletes from the gambling mechanism, I think getting on FanDuel and being like, oh, this is who I got for, USA Sydney's minus 2,000 and he's betting on her, but at the same time, put your bet on Fonta Bowl, see what happens. Not to go against your country or anything like that, but
yeah,
I don't know. I don't do a lot of sports gambling, but I just know that it's part of the conversation and it's just right there at your fingertips. And yeah, I just wish, like you guys said, I'm looking at you shaking your heads. I just wish it had the attraction. Like, I don't think there's a chance for like leagues or anything. I mean, if there were like a mini diamond league, that hit like 6 or 7 spots around the U.S. every summer, that'd be one thing. But if Europe's doing their thing, you're never going to get the top tier. So it's hard to really find that money to get the best in the world that many times in the U.S. It's obviously a question a lot of people have been asking for a long time.
There's just so many obstacles, like sponsorships run this meet, so they can't have guys from from other shoe companies, or getting the stars to actually compete. Like, we love Sydney; she's one of our absolute favorites. I think she ran like 3 or 4 races last year.
Yep.
And I think she recently said that she feels disrespected in the sport, and who knows if she's ever going to be run again. Like, who knows? Like, I think she came out and was like, "Hey, I don't think I get credit as I deserve."
I saw her interviewed at the New Balance Nationals this weekend, and she seemed pretty pumped about this upcoming season, and did say that she's going to run more, and she's got some 400 hurdles, and I expect kind of a bigger year.
Yeah, and like, speaking of her, I guess since we are she ran a 60-meter hurdle race indoors this year, and kind of
that's it. Yep.
And that's no disrespect. She's competing against pros who specialize in that event, so she shouldn't be expected to win. But in the mind of a casual fan, it's like Sydney McLaughlin's going out there and losing. But for us who are, above casual fans, it'd be like, oh, how awesome would it be if people were kind of forced into off events? If Sydney was running the 200 or the 800, obviously in this specialized era, you're like one injury away from really losing your bread and butter, and there's not all that much money to be made in track and field to begin with. So I get that if someone's the best in the world, the best of a generation or all time, you take it really carefully with your career when there's money on the line. But it saps kind of the fun out of it. That's why I love the shot. And Krauser can just go out there and throw every week.
He's a beast. I do think though that it was cool that Sydney was at that meet, and that they had some Nike guys at the one in the Armory, just to kind of keep the because that's the future generation of the sport. And it seems like there's more kids in high school now who are familiar with who the pros are and whatnot than I always was, because I was like a track nerd, like Bob Kennedy, Todd Williams, like those were my guys, but like now, like everybody knows it, and everything is just so out there. Everything is accessible, so it's a lot easier now. I feel just hoping that it translates to bigger numbers and stuff. But
yeah,
I guess we shall say
for the youth is so important. Like, circling back to where my conversation started with you guys, that my first pen relays was the 100th pen relays. I remember getting a poster. I got it signed by Dan and Dave. I got it signed by Leroy Burrell, Kevin Young, just all time. Dennis Mitchell, I think I got it signed by, and I was just running around with a Sharpie, like getting in rooms I wasn't allowed to be in, getting it signed because it's just a junkie. And like, I'm sure the more like Sydney McLaughlin shows up at meets like this, it makes a difference to not necessarily the winners. They already know they're going to be on to great things, but that person that like just scraped into nationals and like to see her, give her a nod, like probably means the world to that kid and can go on and have, a fulfilling career as a result.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think that, gambling certainly could be an aspect. I've said before, maybe do it like horse racing instead of like trying to do individuals, like win, place, and show. I think that could be kind of fun because then you don't really have to know the people. You could see their past races, kind of do that stuff. But man, this was a great time. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Scott.
It was my pleasure.
Yeah, I want to thank Scott for two things. One, for being on this show. It was awesome. I have such fond memories of racing against you. And I also want to thank you for, I believe it was your junior year, going to your prom and missing the one day of the Ocean County Championship so that Sandra South could win by 2 points over Pinelands for the Ocean County title.
Well, I'll accept that. Thank you, David, because that means
you guys would have won.
I would have been
absolutely.
You're telling me I would have beat you in that race. And
1,000%. You guys had in the bag. I'm like, Scott Clayton isn't running.
It was a 50-50 proposition. But if you say I would have beat you, that's good enough for me.
Well, because I was, I think I was fourth and Claphouse was third.
All right, Alex, I've totally been set up here. I don't know what is going on, but to paint the picture, counties 2 days. I did my part. I placed, I think, probably fourth in the 32.
32.
I had a very lovely prom date lined up. Didn't want to leave her stranded. The worst part of that, Dave, is that everybody else on my team got there in time for the prom, and they're rolling in and they tell me, they're like, oh, well, Curtis won the hurdles and then he won the intermediate hurdles, and then Cliff Reynolds was a sophomore at the time, was like runner up in the hurdles, and I'm like, damn, that's a lot of points. And then like Jason Resch, Brian Polkowski show up. They're like, oh, we placed 2, 3 in the 800, and Brian placed in the 16. And I'm like, that's a lot of points. And then the 4 team comes in and they're like, oh, we got like second or third. And it's like, so what happened? They're like, we lost the South by 2 points. And, you didn't go back and run the 16. It was a low day for me, Dave. But thanks for bringing it up.
No, listen, man. You have to, because everybody on my team, they might not admit it, but I will be man enough to admit that you guys were the better team in that track that year. But
so
I had so much fun talking about this with you guys. So
it was a blast, Scotty.
Yeah, this is why we do it. So once again, thank you, Scott Clayton, former Asbury Park Press and digital sports writer, very passionate about XC track and field. I have to make one minor correction. I got excited. I didn't start working APP in 08. It was 2012. I just got overexcited. I was still in college in 08. I'm a dummy. Anyway, but thank you everyone for listening. Really appreciate that. Like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars on Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth. Find us on socials. We will be back next week with more great guests, everybody. So long.